Welcome back to The Thin Veil with Ezra Lipp. I am your host, Ezra Lipp. This is a podcast about unlearning, power, and the stories that shape how we see the world. We have an amazing guest today, none other than Rabbi David Mivasair. Rabbi David is a longtime Jewish educator, community leader, and activist based in Canada. A former congregational rabbi, he is known for his outspoken advocacy for Palestinian human rights and for challenging mainstream Jewish institutional narratives around Israel and Palestine. He also founded the group Connecting Gaza, supporting direct relationships and solidarity between people in Gaza and the broader global community. His work brings Jewish ethical tradition into conversation with questions of justice, power, and collective responsibility. Although I should say, the Rabbi David Mivasair I speak of didn't always hold all those credentials. It was very much a process of unlearning and self-discovery, like we like to talk about on this podcast. He identifies as an anti-Zionist rabbi. He formerly identified as a liberal Zionist rabbi for many years. We speak about that transformation on the show, as well as the group Connecting Gaza that he founded. I am a relatively recent, newer participant in that program, going on a few months now. Basically, Connecting Gaza facilitates WhatsApp text threads as a direct line to families experiencing the effects of ongoing genocide, displacement, and poverty in Gaza, and connects them with people such as me and you that just want to express concern, care, solidarity, and material benefit, and can help sustain their basic needs, as well as provide a lifeline of support, just texting, communicating, hearing about their days, hearing about their families, sharing stuff about your own life. I am involved currently with 2 different fathers in Gaza that are taking care of families. One is responsible for a 16-person family at this time because of all the displacement and orphans and the whole situation created by the genocide. One of the men I am in touch with is this man, Allah, who is just incredibly beautiful. And I can't emphasize this enough, but almost on a daily basis, he sends us these incredibly poetic, vivid, heartfelt messages that just break my heart. And just, it is so inspiring and beautiful. Before the genocide, Allah was a vegetable salesman. He was not some poet or, he was just an ordinary guy, yet he is clearly an amazing writer. If I may now, I'd like to share some of Allah's writing with you all. What I'm going to read is a particularly heavy story because it talks about the birth story of his youngest son, Yousef, who's 2 years old and who was born in the middle of genocide. So this is from Allah writing to the group on Connecting Gaza. On October 7th, 2023, the war began. At that time, my wife Malek was 5 months pregnant with our son. Before the war started, we used to sit together and talk about the baby, wondering what we would name him and dreaming about the day we would finally meet him. But when the war began, everything changed. Displacement started. Fear became part of our daily life. We fled from one place to another, often walking long distances on foot. Malek walked while carrying Yousef in her womb, carrying pain, exhaustion, and suffering that words cannot fully describe. She walked through destroyed streets under the constant sound of warplanes in the sky. During the war, we were displaced more than 20 times, and our home was bombed at the beginning of the war. But the hardest night came in February 2024. In the middle of the night, while fear filled the air, my wife suddenly went into labor. It was dark. Warplanes were flying overhead. Bombing could be heard everywhere. There was no transportation and no nearby hospital. The nearest hospital was about 5 kilometers away. We had no choice. My wife, her mother, and I started walking in the dark streets. There was no one around us, only the 3 of us, and some stray dogs following us. I carried a hammer in my hand just to feel a little safer. We walked under the light of the moon while the sound of bombing, gunfire, and aircraft filled the sky. Then suddenly it started to rain. My wife kept falling from the pain. I lifted her, she fell again, and I lifted her again. Can you imagine a woman in labor walking through broken streets under the rain, surrounded by the sounds of war? In the middle of the road, about 2 kilometers from where we were staying, she collapsed and began screaming in pain. No one could hear her. I ran toward a nearby displacement center and started knocking on doors, shouting and begging anyone who had a way to transport us. A young girl opened the door and saw my desperation. She took me to a man who owned a donkey cart. At first he refused. He said he was too afraid to go out at night because of the bombing. But the girl told him, "Just give us the cart. We will take it ourselves. His wife will die if we don't help." Finally, the man gave us the cart. I ran back to my wife. But when I arrived, I saw my mother-in-law crying while holding something small in her arms. She said through tears, "This is your son." Yousef had been born in the street, under the open sky, while the rain was falling and the night was cold. My wife gave birth with the help of her mother, who had no experience in such things. I immediately took off my shirt and wrapped my newborn son in it to keep him warm, but we were told he had to reach the hospital quickly to cut the umbilical cord and make sure both the baby and my wife would survive. So we placed him on the cart and moved toward the hospital under the rain. After a long and painful journey, we finally arrived, but there were no doctors, only a clerk and a nurse. The nurse tried to help my wife. Suddenly, my baby's skin turned blue. He could not breathe. I ran with him to the nursery and found a doctor sitting there. I begged her to save my son. She quickly treated him. Some water had entered his airway during birth. After terrifying moments, he started breathing again, and Yousef lived. Yousef did not come into this world in a warm hospital room. He was born in a dark road under the rain, surrounded by the sounds of war, but he came to life anyway. Maybe Yousef came to remind us that life can still be born even in the darkest moments, and that hope can still be born in the middle of the war. Yousef is not just a child. Yousef is a miracle that survived war. So, just to say, Yousef was not born because of a natural disaster. He was directly born because of the actions of the state of Israel, which falsely proclaims to be the Jewish state, yet does not represent Jewish values in any way whatsoever, waging a genocide against the people of Gaza. So anyway, that's some of Allah's story. I will read a little more from Allah at the end of this episode. Please like, subscribe, share this, help this podcast grow. If you appreciate my work and these conversations, feel free to join my Patreon page to make it so I can continue producing independent content. And of course, before you do that, consider making a donation to Connecting Gaza or consider joining. There's about 27 families that they are helping now, which is providing real, tangible material support. It is still not enough for even those families, and it is certainly not enough for the millions of families affected by Israel's ongoing genocide in Gaza. So I highly encourage you to go to the show notes, check out Connecting Gaza, and get on a WhatsApp thread. Start helping, doing mutual aid. It really makes a difference. Anyway, without further ado, I'm so happy to have Rabbi David Mivasair on the show today. Please enjoy our conversation. Thank you for being here. Rabbi David Mivasair, thank you so much for being here. I would love to hear about your work with Connecting Gaza. It's an organization I'm so glad I found, and I'd love to know how you started it and what it looks like for you today.
Well, great. So I'll tell you about Connecting Gaza. It's a project that it grew very organically, step by step, out of simply wanting to help people in Gaza. And really, the way it started was about 7 years ago. You know, things in Gaza were really bad then. And I had posted a lot on my own Facebook about my support for Palestine. And occasionally people would just write to me. You know, there's people kind of looking for people that are supporting Palestine. So a guy wrote to me, he says like, hello, how are you, or something. And I just responded to him. I like being supportive and friendly. And it turned into like a really amazing conversation. And we started talking a lot about just like his circumstances in life and mine. And he was about 40 years old. He had worked as a photojournalist. He used to work for AP. And he was married. He had 3 kids. And he did something that really pissed off Hamas. And Hamas demanded that AP fire him, or else they would kick AP out of Gaza. So he got fired, actually kind of on principles. I don't even know exactly what it was. It's like he depicted something that they didn't want shown, or I don't know what. Anyway, that relationship started me helping people, because after a few weeks of writing back and forth and being almost like pen pals, me, I don't know, maybe I'm like 25, 30 years older than him. I'm living in Canada, fine, nice life. He's like suffering in Gaza. After weeks, I remember he wrote to me, he said, brother, I am very, very embarrassed to say this, but I can't feed my children. Can you help me? And I just thought, oh my God, of course, sure. How do I do that? So I sent him $50 by Western Union. He went down to the Western Union office in Gaza and he got $50 in his hand, and he was able to buy more food for his kids. And then the same thing happened maybe a few weeks later. Okay, send him another $50. It doesn't set me back any, and then that happened again. And then it kind of turned into a regular thing. And then he needed more help, and I started posting on my Facebook page like, whoa, there's this guy in Gaza, and I'm helping him, but I can use helping him. So then some of my friends started sending me money for him, and then he asked me if I could help one of his friends. And I'll just say that's how the whole thing started.
How many people are you helping right now through your organization?
Yeah. So you know what? I wouldn't call it an organization. It's not really an organization. Yeah. I call it a project. And so there's 27 families that Connecting Gaza is supporting. For me, there's maybe another dozen. So I can just talk about this a little more in general. I just started saying how this started very organically. And then other people started helping. Then other people started needing help. And then other people started seeing that I was helping other people, So then after October 7th, 2023, when Israel accelerated its ongoing genocide, the need just exploded. So many people needed help. And so many people wanted to help, so just lots and lots of people got involved. And something that really matters to me is I've been politically active and engaged in many ways, doing what I think has a chance of making a difference politically for more than 50 years. And so little of what I do actually has any impact politically. But with this, I know every single thing I do actually reaches someone, makes a difference in their life, at least for them. And the other people involved in this project, I think they're very much like me. They'll write letters, they'll go to protests, they'll do all kinds of things, but we don't really see the results. But in this project of Connecting Gaza, we know like every single thing we do makes a difference. And something I should say right up front is there's room for more people to join us. And you, Ezra, joined us maybe 2 or 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you got right in, you got connected with a couple of families. Maybe you could even talk about that. But the way we have it set up is each family in Gaza has a WhatsApp group that supports them. And each WhatsApp group might have 8 or 10 or 12 people in it. So no one person is carrying too much of the responsibility. Everybody can put in what works for them. The people there are supported, and we're all connected in a kind of an umbrella group so we can learn from each other and give each other, support in what we're all trying to do. And what I just said is, the more people who join us to help, the more help we can deliver.
Yeah. And I'll say one of the best things for me being part of it is not just connecting with the individual in Gaza that we're working with, the family, but like, having all the volunteers being on the thread together, really like joining to support these families. Like, it's just a very nourishing feeling to know that there's people from all over the world that like are actively trying to do this together in a project. I thought it was maybe going to be heavier feeling. I mean, it is heavy, but it's also really positive to just have these people working together to support these families. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And also, I'm sure it's so heart-wrenching too, because I know you've said you have all these families reaching out to you that you just can't help because of the limited capacity.
Yeah. The answer to that is expand our capacity. Bring more people in. Every person can add something. Even people that have no money to donate, they can find other people who do, right? I had to get people to help me to help those people in Gaza, and that's what we're still doing. So we can just expand the capacity. And still, it won't be enough, but we just do what we can do. And it's rough. Yeah.
You are a pro-Palestinian activist. You are also a rabbi, and you were for many years involved in, well, I know you were a Reconstructionist rabbi, but you were still within the ecosystem of somewhat mainstream institutionalized Jewish institutions.
Yes.
And I know you were not always a pro-Palestinian activist. I think you would have described yourself as a liberal Zionist.
Exactly.
And now you describe yourself as an anti-Zionist. And
Right.
I would love to hear, and I know it was probably an ongoing process, but I would love to hear some moments of rupture along that trajectory from you when you had your mind change to get from where you are today from where you started years ago.
Well, it was a very incremental process for me, little by little over decades of my life. I just want to say that when you say I'm a pro-Palestinian activist, I was never anti-Palestinian, And the thing of being like a liberal Zionist or a progressive Zionist, which is really how I would describe myself, 40 years of my life or more from the time I was a teenager up until not long ago when I was in my 60s. That means Zionist means I really believe the place of the Jews in the world is in the land of Israel. Jews should have our own country. We should develop our Jewish society, live there in a Jewish life and, have the state of Israel be where we manifest all that. And be humane, be kind, try to live in some equality, respect human rights, don't oppress Palestinians. And the whole vision of, two-state solution or whatever. So it's not anti-Palestinian in my mind through the 40-year journey of my life, But I'll just say that whole vision or concept of thinking that a Jewish state and a Jewish society is really what should be, and there can be justice and equality and so on for Palestinians. That whole vision, I realized it's not real. It's an error. It's not true. It can't happen. And Israel likes to say it's a Jewish democracy. That's like a contradiction in terms, especially when literally the majority of the population in that land is not Jewish, and that's even after Jews drove out the majority of Palestinians in 1948. I think anybody watching this would know about the Nakba and something like 750,000 Palestinians driven out of their homes destroyed, erased from the face of the earth, 500 villages destroyed, cities that were majority Palestinian, like Haifa, Yaffo, Beersheba was like 100% Palestinian, like no Jews living there, completely emptied of Palestinian population. That was done so there could be a Jewish demographic majority within the boundaries of the state of Israel. But then in 1967, Israel expanded to take the whole land. So anyway, I'm just saying that the actual demographic majority there is not Jewish, and the Jews rule over everyone. And that's what it means to have a Jewish state. So it took me a very long time to put that together in my own mind and then say, wait a minute, that's not supportable. That's not something that I can or should support. And instead, what I do support, I would say, is one democratic state where everyone's equal. No group rules over another group. And I think that's the thing to aspire toward and to work for. But anyway, you asked me like what changed my mind, and I'm just saying it was a very, very long, slow, incremental process. I don't know if I could point to any one thing. I could say markers along the way, things that like I learned, stuff I didn't know that made me think differently than I had ever thought before.
I'd like to hear some markers, perhaps. I know you had mentioned, I heard you mention before that you actually the Mates, Gabor Mate and his family had gone to your synagogue, your congregation, and I believe he was part of that journey for you. Can you recall how he influenced you?
Well, specifically Gabor, who was in my synagogue in Vancouver, I would say he did me the honor of arguing with me. And most people who have a strong disagreement probably wouldn't talk to me, And the fact that he would argue with me in a respectful way, I would say always in private. He never contradicted me in public. But there would be times during those years, we're talking about like 20, 25 years ago, he would talk to me and tell me why I was wrong, And at the time, I never changed my mind from him talking to me right then. He never had the satisfaction of me going like, oh, now I get it. You're right.
Yeah.
I'm wrong. Thank you for telling me. That never happened. But maybe 10 years later, I could say, whoa, actually, Gabor was right. So, I'm saying that to encourage people to not give up on people who hold a position different from our own. If you think that's a person of integrity and a person who does take things seriously, it can be worth talking with them, even if you don't change their mind right then and there. If they're listening, it goes in, it computes. And if you never said those things, it would take them longer to get there. They may never get there. And by you saying it, you can help move them along on their process. So that's what Gabor did for me.
Problem I find, and I'm sure you've run into this many times over, when it comes to Zionism in particular, is that for lack of a better word, and I think it's actually an accurate word, the indoctrination and the way that Zionism has taught to Jews and in the West and worldwide, I'm sure to some extent, is so certain of a certain viewpoint that contradicts a lot of the reality of what has happened on the ground in Palestine, Israel, that it is very hard for people to even imagine any sort of break from that story. I know you studied in Jerusalem, you studied Zionism. So do you feel like you got an accurate education on it when you were studying it?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
No. I first went there when I was 19 years old.
To Jerusalem?
Yeah, I was 19.
Okay.
I went to my second year of university, the Hebrew University, the 1-year overseas students program that was wonderful and amazing and changed my life, to live in Israel, and loved it so much. At that time, I decided that's where I want to go and live the whole rest of my life. I actually decided to stay, not even go back to America after the end of my second year of university. So anyway, no, I was indoctrinated. That's a proper word for it, completely. And just a little bit more about me, and I'm just like I'm one specimen out of millions of Jews. Every one of us has our own, journey or our own experience. So I grew up in a family where everybody was Jewish, but being Jewish wasn't like a big thing to us. My family did not, my mother and father didn't know an aleph from a bet. They can't read Hebrew. They didn't go to synagogue. We didn't have Shabbat in our house. We didn't keep holidays. I just grew up in like a Jewish neighborhood and a Jewish family. And as I was starting to define my own identity and my own place in the world, teenager, adolescent, high school, I found all this on my own. And when you talk about indoctrination, I read books like Exodus, Mila 18, The Source. I don't know if these are meaningful things, but for some people, they're all like this glorification of the founding of the state of Israel and the kind of salvation of the Jews after the Holocaust and the return to this ancient homeland and reviving the ancient language of Hebrew that had not been spoken for 2,000 years and these like amazing things. And I was very attracted to that, which for me was very connected to also being attracted to Judaism as a religion, which is not something I grew up with, but a lot of the beliefs of Judaism make so much sense to me. They're very, very compelling. The ethical demands of Judaism were just of course, still today compelling to me. And the aesthetics, singing songs, celebrating things, lighting Shabbat candles, right? Foods that we eat. I loved it all. I just wanted to immerse myself in it. So part of that was this idea, like I said earlier, there's a country, for me now, it's far, far away on the other side of the world, but that's the Jewish country. It's the Jewish homeland. It's where our ancestors lived in the time of the Bible, in the time of the Talmud, and the prophets lived there, and all these famous rabbis lived there, and they're building this Jewish society, and I want to go and be part of it. And so, you referred to something earlier. You said if you have a certain kind of indoctrination, you don't even see what's going on in the world around you. And the term for that is cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when two things in your cognition don't fit together, like what you're indoctrinated with and what you actually see are in such contrast with each other that you screen one thing out so that you can hold on to the other thing. And I think for me, for many, many years, even though I saw so clearly how Palestinians were oppressed and were treated so unjustly, I could give you so many examples, I held that in a certain category in my mind and didn't let that invalidate this kind of ideology that I wanted to hold on to so strongly. And it just took long, 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 long time.
How did you square those things in your mind at the time? If you were aware of the treatment of Palestinians,
yeah,
yet still held this ideology, what sort of trick did you have to do to justify it and accept it?
I thought that within, say, the spectrum of Zionism or the world of Zionism, there's different factions. There were some that I know were very humanistic, very universalistic. So I just thought, almost, I guess, like we think in any political spectrum, if I can strengthen the side, call it the leftist or the liberal side, things will be better, right? If more of us do that, then we can have a just, humanistic, Jewish society where there's a minority of Palestinians that are treated all right. But that was it was like ignoring a lot of what went on. But you're asking me, how did I put that together in my mind? So what I devoted myself to for 40 years, among other things, was strengthening that. I lived in Israel for 4 different years of my life. And when I lived there, I was active, even when I was 19 years old, 20 years old. I was active with Israeli peace organizations. So it's yeah, we'll fix this. We'll make it better. And then again, back to your very first question, for me, I'd say maybe 10 years ago, I realized, no, it's not going to get fixed. It's baked in. the Jewish, today we call Jewish supremacy, right? It's baked into the whole thing. You can't fix that.
Yeah. I think that's where I get hung up a lot, because I feel like there are people in my life that would call themselves liberal Zionists that are kind of how you're describing how you were, that are just like, oh, well, it's just an imperfect system, but we don't need to throw the system away. And they can't make that leap to realize that the injustice and inequality is baked in. So could you just speak a little more about when you what flipped when you realized that, like what it took for you?
I'll say, I want to just say another thing. Like, I was a really big supporter of J Street in the U.S. And J Street is a liberal Zionist organization. And J Street's approach, I'll just say very roughly, don't quote me on this, even though this is a podcast. But, J Street's like, oh, if it weren't for the settlers, and if the settlers weren't like building all these settlements, and if we didn't have Netanyahu, then everything will be fine. We'd have this lovely liberal Jewish society that we can all be proud of. It has kibbutzim, and it's such a nice liberal Jewish society, and everything will be fine and cool. And the problem is the settlers and the right-wingers. So that is actually what I thought for a very long time. But you asked me what changed my mind. So one thing that changed my mind, I can say specifically, was reading the book written by Professor Ilan Pappé, who was a professor of history, University of Haifa, born and raised, grew up in Haifa, son of refugees from Hitler. And he wrote a book called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And that book so contradicted so much of what I believed for so long because of my indoctrination.
Well, you believed in what you were taught explicitly.
When you say I was taught, it was like I was taught up and down, inside and out, frontwards, backwards, every which way. And just to be very specific, I used to argue with people that, the Jews never stole any land. The Jews never took anything that didn't belong to them, that they didn't buy. Yeah, they bought like big tracts of land, and there were like Palestinian peasants living on it. They were like landless, tenant farmers, and they had to leave. The same way if my landlord sells the apartment building I live in and a new landlord comes and they want their family to live there, I have to leave. Nobody stole anything. That never happened. I would argue with people. I was so sure I was right until, the night of May 14th, 1948, when 5 Arab armies invaded to strangle the baby state of Israel in its cradle and throw the Jews in the sea. I believed all that. I totally, thoroughly believed it. And Ilan Pappé's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, details what went on before that date. When the British mandate ended, the British withdrew. David Ben-Gurion and the Jewish Agency declared the state of Israel that night. But before that, for about 2 years, they were not only planning to throw the Palestinians out, but they had started. And there's so many things. It's like cognitive dissonance. I knew this, but I never put it together. The Deir Yassin massacre happened in April, right? So to say that this began in the middle of May? No. When was the King David Hotel bombing? There was so much Jewish violence against Palestinians, murdering people. The Lehi and Etzel, these terrorist gangs, they would drive through Jaffa, which was the biggest Palestinian city at the time. They would drive through in trucks, just machine gunning out the windows of the trucks, killing people walking down the sidewalk. They would throw hand grenades into coffee shops. This is absolutely documented from newspapers of the time. They planted bombs. They blew up buildings. They were proud of it. They blew up trains. They killed British policemen. They killed other Jews who were opposed to what they were doing. So, you asked me about like turning points in my own journey. So reading that book just like stripped away so much of what I believed. And I couldn't hold on to the same overall big picture anymore. I had to readjust everything. So that was one turning point for me.
Did you trust it? Was any part of you, as you were reading, wanting to be like, oh no, maybe this guy is, I don't know about this Elon Pape guy. Maybe he's conspiracy theories. Maybe he's Hamas. Maybe, how did you trust it that?
Well, first of all, it's thoroughly documented. It has, I don't know how many footnotes, like every single assertion that he makes, he shows where he gets it from. It's like from David Ben-Gurion's diaries, or from the minutes of the meeting of the Haganah, or from what a British officer in the field reported back to his commander. It's like it's completely, thoroughly documented. And what you just said, a lot of other people do say that. They try to discredit him. So no, I just say to you, by the time I read that, I just believed it. I accepted it. And there's been a number of different things actually that I've read that changed my mind about stuff. I'll just mention one more if you want. I went to the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. I took courses in the history of the State of Israel. I took courses in political science in Israel. I took courses in the history of Zionism. I mean, like university courses. They were really serious. I didn't get it so much about how selective or biased everything that I was getting was. So I had heard about the Arab riots of 1936-39 and how violent they were and how, they attacked the Jews and stuff like that. And that's what I got. And how like the British, anyway, very biased perspective. And I'll just say maybe 5 years ago, because of where I'm at now, I was on some kind of email list or something of PYM, Palestinian Youth Movement. And near where I live, which is near Toronto, they were going to do some kind of a internal study session, to help them learn more. And they're younger people, like university age, maybe in their 20s. And they were going to do this thing to study 4 sessions of a long essay written by a Palestinian writer and scholar named Ghassan Kanafani. And he wrote this essay called something like The Arab Revolt of 1936-39. And the people in PYM thought, oh, this is what we should study. So we learn about the history of Palestine and what happened in Palestine. I thought, cool, I'll join that. I'll just like see what they're all talking about, I really recommend reading that. It's not very long. It is about the events that the recent film called Palestine 48 is based on.
Palestine 36?
Right, thank you. Palestine 36, you're right. Anyway, it taught me so much about the oppression, the dispossession, the just horrible discrimination against the Arabs by the British and the Zionists, as the Zionists were filling in more and more population of Jews, right? And also struggles within Palestinian society between certain elites and the more kind of working people. There was so much that I learned from that. And it just, again, it changed my understanding of the whole situation. And some of what the British did then was collective punishment. It was destroying the houses, destroying families' homes. It was executing people that had nothing to do with it. It was like they even wiped out entire villages. They erased whole villages. The British did that between 36 and 39. And I also want to say that Kanafani himself was assassinated by Mossad. They killed him. He was dangerous, right? He wrote a lot. And he was popular and he was listened to, and Mossad killed him.
As we've spoken about before, I am somewhat new to anti-Zionism, as in I've only been studying it seriously for the last year or two. And now that I've studied it fairly deeply, it is constantly so overwhelming when I think about the level of ignorance that is pervasive in the Jewish community amongst smart, very well-educated adults, where, when I talk about Israel as a settler colonial project, which has been well documented by hundreds of historians and scholars for decades and decades, and then I have these adults that are lawyers and therapists, and they write to me and they are like, "You are out of your gourd." As you said, the Zionists bought up every piece of land, and when they got there, it was swamp and mosquitoes and dust. And what are you are smoking what are you smoking? This is crazy. And it feels like, not to mention that sort of indoctrination has been used to manufacture consent for ongoing genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians in the occupation for decades. But it feels like it's such a shanda that our people could be so misinformed. It feels like a crisis, and
It does.
it is just incredible. The cognitive dissonance that I felt when I realized that was so intense, and continues to be the more I think about it. And I'm wondering if you feel that way.
Absolutely. Sure. Something else I want to say here is there are growing numbers of Jews who are active in changing this, right? So maybe 15 years ago, I joined Jewish Voice for Peace in the U.S. I live in Canada, but I'm originally American. I vote in the U.S. So there's a very important organization in the U.S. called Jewish Voice for Peace. And here in Canada, we have an organization called Independent Jewish Voices. There's another organization called If Not Now that people a lot younger than me, each of these, they're working in their own way to do like what you're talking about. And there's more and more of them. There's more and more of us who are like waking up, like how can we not wake up, And then together, I think we're making a great difference in shaping how other people can see this, So like coming out of that background, like it is shocking. Just what you said, everything you said, 100%, I'm with you. And this, I guess my orientation toward life is we can change that. We can affect it. And just, there's many, many, many different ways that each of us can do things. And, you having this podcast and having me on it and talking about this, it will reach people. It will contribute to making the kind of change that has to come.
That's certainly my hope. However, it's still like, I'm involved in Jewish Voice for Peace Sacramento. I think it's an amazing organization. It's been so great for me. There are people that I've mentioned that to, and they have said, "Oh, you need to look at this article," and it's basically like, this is a terrorist organization.
Oh, trying to debunk it or discredit it.
Yeah, and I guess I'd like to talk more about the weaponization of anti-Semitism to silence the anti-Zionist Palestinian liberation movement. You yourself, I saw, have a page on Canary Mission, which is an organization that tries to look for anti-Semites.
I think you said the wrong word. It's an organization that tries to, what do they do?
I said highlight anti-Semites, but I think that's what they would say. What would you say?
No, that's not it.
What would you say?
No, they do exactly what you're talking about. They maliciously, manipulatively, intentionally use false accusations of anti-Semitism to discredit people and go beyond discrediting. They try to dox people and cost them their jobs, get them kept out of school training programs, get them denied grants, have their articles not published, their films not produced. So it's called Canary Mission. It's highly funded. It's very secretive. And it's been around for decades. And it doxes whoever they want. And they really try to intimidate and silence people. And I also want to say, for me, like, I'm retired. Like, nobody can do anything to me. But honestly, even when I was younger, when I was raising children and I needed to be employed, I couldn't speak as freely as I can now. Right? So, Canary Project is based on intimidating people by threatening their personal lives, trying to ruin personal relationships. And it's not, Canary Mission is what it's called. It's not only that. I mean, that is pervasive throughout the entire Zionist establishment, and it has been for years and years and years. And we really need to push back against it, like not accept it.
So I think I know this answer, but do you have a larger Jewish institution, like a congregation or synagogue, that you are able to be a part of these days?
Well, my larger Jewish institution that I'm a part of really is Independent Jewish Voices, Jewish Voice for Peace. I feel like we're that connected. I'm just not in the U.S.
Sure.
I went to
Yeah.
the national members meeting of Jewish Voice for Peace in Baltimore the first couple days of May last year, and there's 2,000 of us there, So I'm not being silly. Like, that is my Jewish community.
Yeah.
I am there as much out of a sense of religious obligation, like it's a mitzvah for me to do this, right? Like
Yes.
right in the Torah, we are told, tzedek, tzedek tirdof, justice you shall pursue, right? In the Bible, it says, bakesh shalom v'radfehu, seek peace and pursue it. And those are the only two mitzvot in all of Judaism that use the word redof, which means pursue. And even the rabbis in the Talmud commented on this. They say there's 613 mitzvahs or commandments in Judaism, 613, whatever, keep the Sabbath, honor your father and your mother, eat kosher food, pray this and then, have fair weights and measures. Yeah, 613 commandments. And out of all of them, there are two commandments where the Bible or the Torah uses the word redof, which means pursue it. Pursue it. That means don't just sit back and wait for the opportunity. Sun is going down Friday night. Okay, it'll be Shabbat. Cool. I'm going to eat. Oh, yeah, I better eat kosher. No, pursue it. Get up. Go out. Apply yourself to it. Make it happen. And those two are tzedek, tzedek, tirdof, justice you shall pursue, and bakesh shalom, v'radfehu, seek peace and pursue it. So I'm just saying, your question to me was, is there a bigger Jewish institution that you can be part of today? And my answer, seriously, is there's no synagogue. There's no other Jewish organization. There's no JCC. There's no federation. There's no nothing like that actually is living out real Jewish values. They're all taken over, really, by Zionism. So the ones that work for me, I've told you, and for me, that is my religious life. I can have Shabbat at home, fine, that's cool. Light candles, eat challah, sing Shalom Aleichem, that's nice. I wake up in the morning, I literally pray, thank God, before I eat, say Hamotzi. Yeah, I have that religious life, but the religious life that connects with the bigger Jewish world is me connected with the other Jews who are working so hard to do the right thing in this world at this time. So that's, I'll just say a little bit more. There are seeds that are being planted for like the next crop, the next wave of what has to come. So one of the people who joined us in Connecting Gaza, that you're part of, supporting families in Gaza, is a rabbi named Kat Zavis, who's in Oakland, California. And Kat is the rabbi of a synagogue called Beit Tikkun. Beit Tikkun is an explicitly anti-Zionist synagogue, and people join it. There's hundreds of people in Beit Tikkun, and they daven together, they celebrate together, they study Torah together. They're not all in Oakland, because in this day and age, we can be in different places and connect. That's what needs to be, and people are starting it. So again, you asked me, are there bigger institutions that I can be a part of? But they're coming.
They're coming, yeah.
And they're not just like coming like a rain cloud is coming. They're coming because people like you and me are making them. And come back 10 years from now and things are going to look quite different.
Do you think there's a chance, given what's been happening, given how things are escalating, do you think there is a chance for a free Palestine, a democratic state in that land? in our lifetimes?
I think that's, I can say it's aspirational. And it's like asking me, do I think there's a chance the Mashiach will come? It's something to work for, something I'm devoted to, something I feel like is very important to talk about and like make it part of people's consciousness and part of people's vision. I think Israel has such a grip on the Jews who live in Israel and such a grip on the most powerful other factors in the world that it's not gonna change easily. No, I just want to say, if you asked me, is the Soviet Union ever going to just disappear? I don't even remember the dates, but suppose you asked me that in 1975. It's like, what are you talking about, the Soviet Union disappearing? It's like, world superpower, right? Nelson Mandela sitting in solitary confinement for more than 20 years. Is he ever going to get out, much less become president of South Africa? So you get what I'm saying. I mean, I grew up with the Berlin Wall. I remember November 9th. I don't remember what year it was, but I remember when they took sledgehammers to the Berlin Wall and smashed it, I grew up in Maryland when there was a law in the book they called anti-misogynist, something or another. It was illegal for people deemed to be white to marry people deemed to be black. That was illegal. I remember when that law was struck down. And again, it wasn't struck down the way something gets struck by lightning. It was struck down because people took it upon themselves. Like, let's just say a so-called white person and a so-called black person got married and took it to the courts. And then the courts struck it down. So you hear me, I'm saying like change can happen. But also we have to prepare the ground and we have to be like the instruments of it to be ready for it. Otherwise, I don't know, it'll take longer. There's another classic rabbinic midrash from the time of the Talmud, which is like 2,000 years ago, that I love, and it's very instructive for our times. When the Hebrew slaves do get out of Egypt, they flee. And then, the next morning, Pharaoh says, oh my God, we have to go get them and bring them back. And he leads his army out. So the people are leaving. Runaway slaves are leaving. They get to the Red Sea. They're blocked at the Red Sea. The Pharaoh's army is coming to get them. They're all screaming and crying because they know something horrible is going to happen. They cry out to Moses. Moses is like, yo, you got us into this. Now you save us. Moses calls out to God, like, oh, God, save us, save us. And God says to Moses, why are you crying out to me? You hold your staff out over the water and see what will happen. So God's putting the agency on Moses. Like, don't look for that kind of miracles. And Moses holds his staff out over the water. And then the Torah says, you can just read this in the book of Exodus, God brought a big wind and the sea parted and the people went through on dry land. But the Midrash adds in there, there's between one sentence and the next sentence, there's a whole story in there that you don't see in the Torah. So the Midrash says, Moses held out his staff and nothing happened. And the people are screaming and crying and freaking out and nothing happened. And they're screaming and crying and freaking out, and the Pharaoh's army's coming, and nothing happens. And this one guy named Nachshon ben Aminadav walks into the water. And he walks in, it goes up to his ankles, keeps walking, goes up to his knees, keeps walking, goes up to his belly button, keeps walking, keeps walking, keeps walking. The water gets up to his nostrils, and that's when the sea parted. And I think that is so instructive for this concept of we have to do our part, even when we can't see how the whole thing is going to come together and work in the end. Do I think it's possible that there will be justice and equality and freedom in Palestine in our lifetime? And I said it's aspirational, and we just have to do what we can do. We look at the headlines of today, when we get off this call and we look at what's happened in the world during the last hour while we were talking, it's going the other direction.
How do you celebrate Passover?
It's rough. How can I celebrate Pesach while the body of Jewish people, the country that says it's the Jewish state, and every major Jewish institution are perpetrating genocide in real time, like the worst war crimes. And on top of that, manipulating our governments, everything that ICE is doing to people, murdering people in the street. I attribute that to the Zionist influence, otherwise it wouldn't be happening. Anyway, how can I celebrate Pesach? And I struggle with that. And I think I could just leave you and anybody listening with, I don't want to give up on it. That the whole story of Pesach is actually, I'll just call it salvation, can come from where we don't even know. We can't see it. We can't anticipate it. And I don't want to give up on that story. I think it's very important for us to hold on to it and keep living in that consciousness that things can change in ways that we just have no way to anticipate. And we have to do our part, even if we don't know exactly how it's going to work out.
Well, I really appreciate all you're doing.
Thank you, Ezra. You're bringing your gifts and what you can do, and just everything will add up, and it contributes, makes a difference.
I sure hope so. Yeah, that's the idea.
It does.
All right, and that is a wrap. Thank you, Rabbi David Mivasair, for coming on the show. Don't forget to go to Connecting Gaza. Before I leave, I want to read you one more message that I received a few weeks ago from Allah. Good morning from Gaza. A morning we carry with heavy hearts, yet it still holds hope because of you. Here in this small place worn down by siege and war, life begins with a story that can never be fully told. My children wake up not to alarm clocks, but to silent worry, carrying empty bottles, searching for clean water, as if they are searching for a missing piece of life itself. In our home, when only one last piece of bread remains, it is not eaten. It is shared. Each child looks at the other with eyes full of love, hunger, and dignity that refuses to be fulfilled at the expense of a sibling. In those painful moments, we realize that poverty has not taken our humanity, and hunger has not stolen our love. The women of Gaza, they are the unbreakable story. With tired eyes and hearts full of patience, they still create life out of pain and comfort out of fear for their children. In the eyes of the children, they are a truth the world cannot ignore. Innocent eyes asking, why all this pain and suffering? We are not asking for the impossible. We just want to live with dignity. For our children to drink clean water, to sleep without fear, and to wake up to something that feels like life. Your presence, your support, your words, your prayers, they are not small things. They are a light in a very dark place. Good morning with hope and resilience from Gaza. Allah and his family of 3 and his wife Malik are getting by, but they need the help of people like myself and you. So please consider getting involved. Thank you so much again for tuning in. We will have a brand new episode for you next week. And like and share, subscribe, all that. From the river to the sea, may Palestine be free.